Today I'm going to make a mulberry natural edge bowl. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today I have this bowl blank that was cut out of a piece of mulberry. The bark has been removed, and that's pretty typical for pieces like this. The bark doesn't have to stay there for a natural edge bowl to be created. Now typically when we have bark on the bowl itself, it's considered a live edge. When there's no bark, it's a natural edge. So that's the distinction between the natural edge and the live edge bowls. This piece has been aging for a while in my wood library. I was out earlier looking for a piece to select for the turning today, and I came up with this piece. I want to see what's inside here. I know this has been sitting out there for at least a couple years. There aren't any apparent cracks. There is this natural forming crack on the exterior of this piece, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But all in all, this looks pretty interesting, and I can't wait to see what we turn from this particular bowl blank. So I'm going to get this mounted to the lathe, and we're going to get started. All right, so the top of this piece is a little uneven, and right in the center portion, it's sloped pretty dramatically. So I need to make a flat spot there for my 4-spur drive center to grip snugly. And when I'm turning a piece like this, a natural edge, one of the big things that makes a big difference with this is to make the wings basically the same height. Unless you have some kind of really odd piece of wood, you want the wings to be about the same height. It seems like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but here you can see this side's a little bit higher, so I'm going to loosen the tailstock, turn it just a touch, and then tighten the tailstock back up and then check it again. So right at the top, the sapwood is in the same spot on each side. When you do that, the piece is just going to be that much more balanced. This is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. I use this to do most of my roughing. And I'm going to rough and turn this corner and create the curve that will become the bottom side of this bowl. Now, this is mulberry, and I've had this piece for quite a while. It's tricky. When I show these different turnings, I don't want you guys to think that it has to be one way or the other. Now, I want to keep snugging up the tailstock with this piece because until that spur drive center seats really well, it's going to loosen itself up. So you want to make sure you're tightening your tailstock frequently. Now this piece of wood is pretty much dry or equalized. That does not mean that you have to dry the wood before you turn it. Unlike traditional woodworking, we can turn wet wood or green wood, and quite honestly, green wood is much easier and much more enjoyable to turn than dry wood. But it's a misconception that comes along with the woodworking world is to think that we have to wait until the wood is dry. Now, we cover all the details of this in my Tree to Bowl Understanding Green Wood online course. You might want to check that out because we go into great detail. Whether you're managing just a few logs that maybe you found or somebody gave you, or if you're going to process an entire tree, we go over through everything that you need to know while you're doing that. One of the things that you need to understand is that the wood is always holding moisture, no matter how dry it may seem. And that moisture level is going to affect how you work with the wood and how you store the wood. That's really critical. The green wood can be turned pretty much at any time. It's easy to turn, but it will move most likely after it's been turned. And sometimes that's fine, sometimes it's not. The other thing that's challenging is to take a large, thick piece of wood like this and just leave it to dry completely, because usually that thick piece of wood will dry unevenly. The center portion of it will stay wet, and it will also crack a lot. It's very common for large chunks of wood to crack. There are ways to work around this. Another thing to keep in mind is this: every species is different, and actually every tree is different. So you could even have the same species of wood that has different characteristics. Although that doesn't happen too often, it is possible. So Essentially, you could take a piece of wood like this and stick it on a shelf, and depending on the conditions, that's your environment, the humidity, the weather, how much air movement there is, and the moisture content of the wood and the species of the wood, it may dry just fine. Now, this is mulberry, and it has dried. There are some minor checks and cracks that have occurred in the sapwood, but they're minor and they can be dealt with, and they're not that big of a deal. Other types of wood, if you try to do this with, they'll just split themselves apart and they become nothing more than firewood at that point. So you just want to keep that in mind, that every species is different, every condition is different. Your environment is critically important as far as how the wood's going to be managed or how it's going to react to the different surroundings and what's going to happen to it. So those are all factors to keep in mind when you're doing that. But again, check out that course that I have online, Treatable Understanding Green Wood. We go into great detail there. I think you're going to really enjoy it, especially if you enjoy taking a raw piece of wood and turning it into a bowl like I do. Now this is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back. With the tenon and the shoulder established, now we have the bottom of the bowl created. So essentially I need to make the curve going up to the rim and then connect the rim and the bottom and make that a smooth flowing curve is what we're looking for. Take your time. Remember, the pace of your cut dictates also how clean that cut's going to be. You can see that I'm not going very quickly, and this is dry wood. You can see the shavings coming off almost more like dust, and that's a good indication that this wood is dry and a very dense wood as well. Okay, I'm going to clean up the side of the bowl. There's a little bit of unevenness or lower spots here I need to deal with. Now I'm going to be making this cut from left to right. Because I'm making this cut at almost a 90-degree angle, it's still considered a supported grain cut. I will not be damaging the in-grain fibers, but because those fibers are so dry, I also want to take my pace way down. You can see I'm going very slowly and making a really light pass. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for the sharp edge of the tool to do all the cutting and we're not ripping out in-grain fibers. If you get too aggressive here, you can easily rip out those fibers. Now the reason I'm going from left to right is I also don't want to tear out any of that sapwood that is the natural edge or the rim of the bowl. If I were to go from right to left, there's a good chance that I could rip out some of that material and leave a nasty mark on the rim of the bowl. Here you can see I'm just taking my time and going nice and slow and taking that material down so we have a nice even cut all the way across this piece. It's a good idea to go and sharpen your tool before making these cuts too. You want a really good sharp edge on your bowl gouge. All right, that's looking really good. I have a little bit of a low spot here still, right there. So I need to take it down just a little bit more. Now my hands and arms are not moving. This is my body weight shifting from left to right. That's how you get a nice, clean, straight cut. Okay, so here you can see the profile. I have the tenon in the shoulder established, and I have the rim established, and I have part of the curve established, but you can see the high spots or the corners where those three sections are connecting. Now I can use a scraping cut and a shear scraping cut to merge those areas and make this curve nice and fluid. What I want is I want one nice smooth fluid curve going from the rim down to the base of the bowl. You can see me tilting my head. What I'm looking for is I'm looking up and I'm watching the top edge of this bowl and making sure the shape is what I want. I start the tool, but then I'm watching the top edge of the bowl to create the shape of the bowl. Here I'm doing a push cut to take that high spot down and then blend those areas in It's getting closer, but you can still see that where those transitions occur. So I need to reduce this farther, and I need to do my shear scraping to smooth out those corners. There you can see the shear scrape cleaning off the bottom portion and getting nice smooth transition there, that bottom curve. You want to take your time. Remember, the exterior of the bowl is the bowl. It's what everybody sees. It's what they touch. It's what the inside is mirroring. So you really want to take your time and make the exterior of the bowl exactly the way you want. So now I'm using the shear scrape to transition from the bottom of the bowl all the way around to this corner. And then I'll reposition the tool rest and continue that curved shape around the bowl. I've got a video all about the shear scrape. You might want to check that out. This is a great way to refine the surface of your bowl, to take down any high spots, to blend two areas together, and just make the piece relatively smooth. The shear scrape is the technique to use for that situation. What I'm using is the lower wing here. The top wing is just a hair off of the surface, so it's not engaging the wood at all. The lower wing of this bowl is what is engaging the surface. Now I've repositioned the tool rest and I'm working around that curve on the outside of the piece and blending that all together as well. And yes, I'm up on those wings. There's air between those wings. You make sure that you're not pushing into the bowl at all. You're just letting the tool glide across the surface and shave away the material. Take your time. And with the shear scrape, the tool handle is dropped at about a 45-degree angle. That's also what reduces that impact and makes it a nice shaving cut, basically. It's just shaving away a light area. I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge to shape the tenon. And then we'll get this reversed and mounted into the 4-jaw chuck. The mulberry is actually a really beautiful wood. It has this golden yellow color to it. It's just really, really pretty. Now, the center of this is not balanced really well. There's a little bit of a high spot on one side, so I'm going to move across this a little bit and clean it up so that it's a little more balanced in the turning. It reduces the vibration as well while I've got the lathe speed up. There you can see the high spot. Now I'm going to switch over to my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, and I'm going to start working down to the wall thickness that I would like. So I'm clearing out some material here. It's actually just hitting the high spots. And I'm going to create a small little valley on the inside rim of this piece and get some of this material away. And then I can come back out to this edge and establish my wall thickness. Right now it's relatively thick. It's going to be a lot thinner than that. So we start with the flute almost closed. It's not quite at the 3 o'clock position, probably about the 2:30 position, the flute rotated to the right. I always want to have the flute rotated in the direction of the cut. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking down on the tool and I'm making the bevel of the bowl gouge parallel to the exterior of the bowl. Remember how I said how important the exterior of the bowl is? Well, that's another good reason, because the interior is mirroring the exterior. Here you can see I'm keeping the bevel parallel to that exterior, and I work down until I have almost too much material that's going to be engaging the bowl gouge. And then what I'll do is I'll come back across here and remove the next section down, and then I will continue that wall down into the interior of the bowl. What's nice with these, the gaps between these wings, or the air between the wings, is you can see exactly what the bowl gouge is doing. You can see how it's getting a little thicker there. Now I'm going to take down a little bit more of the core, or the center mass. Now the center mass is also helping it to maintain those wings in the position that they're in right now, so they don't waver, they don't flop around and cause issues. Because that center mass is there, it's keeping those intact for the time being. The more of the center mass that gets removed, the more opportunity there is for those sidewalls or those wings to flex. And if they're flexing, they can't be cut smoothly, so you do not want to go back up to those walls. Here you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm basically cutting down. I keep removing material till I sneak up on the wall thickness that matches the previous area. This way I know I'm getting the same wall thickness all the way down the bowl. You want to stop frequently and check that wall thickness. Here I'm rubbing the bevel, blending in from a previous cut, and then very lightly making a pass to reduce material down to get that wall thickness matching the rest of the wall. What you want is the bottom portion here is going to be a little bit thicker until it's not, if that makes sense. You don't want to overdo it and make the bottom portion there too thin, because you obviously can't put wood back on there. And you don't want to go from a relatively thick rim to a thin portion down on the inside of the bowl. So you just take your time and you keep sneaking up on that wall thickness. And as soon as you have the wall thickness, then you progress down into the bowl to the next section. So because I'm pretty deep into the bowl, I'm going to remove some of this center mass. And because the center mass is being removed, I am not going to return to that top rim anymore with this tool, because I know that those wings are now flexing. This is my 5/8 inch gouge, and this I use for roughing or removing material quickly when I'm not too concerned with the finished surface area. I use my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept-back bowl gouge to do the final cuts to get the nice smooth surface. So I'm going to get that down pretty close to the surface level that I want with my 5/8 inch gouge, and then I'll switch over to my 1/2 inch gouge. You can see how it's thick in the area that we're going to be approaching now with the 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to, again, sneak up on that thickness, take it down just a little bit at a time until it's the right thickness. Now I'm letting the bevel rub there so I can just delicately come in and start the cut. When you have the flute open like this, it's very easy to get a nasty catch. So you do not want to, you don't ever want to do that while you're roughing. You don't want to do it in any place where you're not going to have a very smooth, even surface. That means there's nothing unpredictable that's coming across that bowl gouge. You're just cutting a relatively smooth surface and taking away a little bit of material. It's okay to have the flute open like that. You just don't want to do that where you have a thick amount of material because it will overwhelm the gouge. Essentially, a catch, when you get a catch with a bowl gouge, it is the fact that the bowl gouge is overwhelmed. That means there's too much material for the bowl gouge to cut all at one time. So what happens is the gouge gets jammed up. The wood either comes to a stop, the lathe belt might grind or squeak because it's being held up. Essentially, the tool can't cut the material fast enough. That's what a catch is. The tool could come out of your hands. It can be scary when you get a catch. We've all gotten them, especially when we start out. But what you need to understand is there's a reason why you get catches. And we also cover all of that in the Bowl Gouge Mastery course. It's an online course that I have on my website. If you go to turnawoodbowl.com and click on the shop, you can see the Bowl Gouge Mastery course there. We go into all of the reasons why catches occur, and we go into all of the ways to properly use your bowl gouge. That course also has a really nice troubleshooting area. So if you're having issues with your bowl gouge, you can quickly go through the troubleshooting area and most likely figure out exactly what's happening. But the best part of the troubleshooting area is it helps you correct all of those problems. So you might want to check that out. Okay, so I'm down to the last few passes on the bottom inside of the bowl. So I want to sharpen my tool. So I'm making a really nice clean cut there. It's going to do two things. It's going to make a nice clean cut, but it's also going to make it less sanding for me to do to finish the interior of this piece. With your sharpening station set up, it should only take a few seconds to sharpen your tool. So I'm rubbing the heel and I'm backing up a bit. Now remember, I'm not going up those wings all the way, but I backed up a bit so that I can merge all of those areas together into one nice clean pass here. Now I'm going to close the flute at about the 3 o'clock position and just let it cut the tip there really delicately. I want the inside of the bottom to have a nice fluid curve to it. I do not want it to have a flat area or a dimple or ridges. It just should flow as a nice curve from the sides down into the bottom. So here I'm going to rub the heel to pick up the cut. The flute is relatively open, making a very light cut. Now I'm rotating the flute to the right side. It's about a 45-degree angle here at about the 130 position. Now I'm closing the flute as I come to the bottom of the bowl. So now the flute is at about the 3 o'clock position, and I'm just going to let it delicately cut across that bottom portion. There we go. That's the shape I was looking for. So now I'm going to take my time and I'm going to sand all of the surface area. You can sand a bowl like this with the lathe turning, which I will do a little bit of that. But hand sanding and using the edge of the sander, especially along the rim here, is really important. Now I'm following the contour of the rim. I'm not just going to flatten it out. So if you notice the way the contour of the rim goes up on the top there is perpendicular, but on the sides it turns down and then it comes back up on the other ingrain side. So you want to follow that contour and just clean up the exterior of the rim. All right, with the piece sanded, I'm going to reverse mount this into a jam chuck. I put a small piece of foam padding in there, and I'm going to line up the tailstock right to where it was connected before. And using my 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, I'm going to do a push cut to remove the tenon, and then I'm going to start shaping the foot of this bowl. So essentially the shoulder of this bowl will become the foot of the bowl now. Now this is mulberry. Basically, any fruit wood that you can get your hands on is highly desirable. Most fruit wood is just beautiful in appearance, but it also turns really nice. Black cherry, any kind of fruit wood is just amazing. I've had the opportunity to turn avocado, citrus, all sorts of different fruit wood, pear. It's just really nice wood to turn for whatever reason. I don't know if it's for the sugar contents or the way the tree grows with the nutrients in it or what the fact might be, but fruit wood is just really good to turn. If you get an opportunity to get a hold of any fruit wood, you're going to want to take advantage of that. Okay, so I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge here, and I just had a little chunk come off. I'm not going to stop the lathe here. If I've got a fractured piece of wood there and I stop the lathe, the torque of the lathe stopping or the torque of it starting again could break that piece or just throw it off center a little bit. Instead, I'm just going to keep turning and hope this doesn't break apart on me. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to apply forward pressure. You can see there's a little brittleness to that wood. It did break away a bit there. So basically I applied forward pressure while at the same time turning off the lathe, and that will allow that spindle detail gouge to cut through the bottom portion there. So I'm going to hand sand or use the sander with the lathe off and sand that area nice and smooth in the bottom of the bowl. All right, I'm going to use my favorite finish. This is tried and true original. This is linseed oil and beeswax. That's it. Now, it's relatively cold right now, and the viscosity of this finish is much thicker than it is in the summertime when it's nice and warm. And there's nothing wrong with that. I get that question actually pretty frequently, because if it's cold where you are, this will appear really thick, and you might think, well, this isn't going to work, but it will work just fine. You still want to only apply a very thin coat. If you're seeing the finish on the wood, you have enough finish. You absolutely do not want this to go on thick. It will dry and cure, and if it goes on thick, it will become gummy and it will mess up your surface. So you want to apply a very thin amount. Basically, I've soaked that rag once for the outside and once for the inside, and if you saw, I used my fingers to squeegee off all of the excess finish. So I'm basically just rubbing this in, and as soon as you see anything on the surface of the wood, that's all you need. So you want a really thin coat, and then I'm going to let this sit for an hour, and I'm going to wipe off any excess. That's really important because, again, it'll gum up. If you have any thick areas, it will get gummy, and that's definitely not what you want. And then after 24 hours, we're going to burnish this with steel wool, and it'll become nice, and it'll have a nice luster to it. Look at that wood. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. This has sat around for 2 years on the shelf. Look at that shimmer and the chatoyance in that. I love this wood. It's absolutely gorgeous. That's amazing. It was a relatively plain full blank, but it is absolutely gorgeous to look at this piece after it's been turned. Look at the medullary rays in this wood and the shine and the shimmer that makes. Simply amazing. Wow. Well, here it is. This is the Mulberry Natural Edge Bowl. I'm really happy with this. I love the chatoyance, that shimmer that you get from the medullary rays inside the mulberry. Just really fun to see. Now, this wood will darken when it's exposed to UV light, so you just need to be aware of that. But when it's initially cut open, it has that golden, beautiful yellow color to it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now, that line across the bark was pretty deep, and it's still going through here, but it stops. And I'm turned enough of the mulberry that I'm pretty certain that this will not continue and this should be pretty stable. But if you get a crack that's going like that through a bowl, you need to really pay attention to it and be careful. The biggest thing you need to keep in mind is stay out of the line of fire. Stay off to the side. Usually you're seeing me turn from the face of the bowl. Sometimes I'll be on the other side, but normally I'm on the face of the bowl and on the right side of it, so that if something comes off, if this were to split and go flying, it's usually going to stay in a plane of that rotation. So it'll come out somewhere along that path, forward or backwards. So you just need to be aware of that. It could happen. It's very rare. I've never had a bowl completely fall apart on me like that, but it is possible, especially when you have a deep fracture like that. But again, I've turned enough of the mulberry that I'm pretty comfortable with this being stable, and it's not moving at all right now. I did use my glue crack technique on the edges, and these little small little cracks along the in the sap line area here. I also applied that technique here there as well. If you want to check that out, I got a video all about how to deal with cracks. Now the technique I used was the glue and sandpaper. Super simple, fills them in very quickly. The ones along the sap line are very minor. That's just more cosmetic than anything. This center one is a little bit more concerning, but all in all, I think it's beautiful. It's really cool with this definition of this line going through it. And like I said, I just love this mulberry. What's incredible is it has this color and this clarity even after sitting for a couple years on the shelf. It's just beautiful wood to turn. Basically, any fruit wood that you can get your hands on has the potential to be really good. This is true of black cherry, avocado, citrus. I've turned some orange tree wood that was absolutely gorgeous, just really, really nice. So basically any fruit wood tree that you can get a hold of is probably going to be a good turning. So don't let it get by if you have the opportunity to get a hold of a fruit tree. All right, guys, if you've liked this video, click that like button. Thank you, I appreciate that. Subscribe to this channel if you aren't already subscribing, and remember to check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need to know about turning wood bowls. Plus, I have courses that will quickly accelerate your wood bowl turning skills, so check it out, turnawoodbowl.com. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you thought of this bowl. Let me know if you've done any natural edge bowls or if you've turned any mulberry. I would love to hear from you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy turning.